Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Beattie. I'm a freelance literary critic and book reviewer, and I was pleased to be one of the jurors for the 2021 Trillium Book Awards this year. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's live event on behalf of Ontario Creates. Ontario Creates plays a leading role in supporting Ontario's creative economy by providing innovative programs and services to help creative industries grow and create award-winning and innovative content. Ontario Creates works with many talented creators across Ontario's screen, music, and publishing sectors, and it is the publishing sector that brings us here today with the Trillium Book Awards. This year's winners join the long list of talented Ontario authors whose work has been honored here at home and around the world. Every year, the Trillium Book Awards gives us an opportunity to shine a light on literary excellence. And as we celebrate, we also reflect on the power of storytelling. We acknowledge that this land we are on brings with it a rich history, including myriad stories that have been told over many years, and important and creative literature that is emerging today. From where I speak, I am on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, land that is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We are grateful for the opportunity to gather, create, and share on this land. From here in Ontario, I also want to welcome viewers from around the world. In 2021, Canada is the guest of honor country at the Frankfurt Book Fair. I urge you to learn more about the Frankfurt author and illustrator delegation and discover virtual events at canadafbm2021.com. Canada's theme, singular plurality, captures Canada's culture of diversity, where each of us is unique but connected as a whole, both by our differences and by our shared values, a theme reflected by the work of this year's Trillium Award-winning authors. This year's winner for the Trillium Book Award for Poetry is Jody Chan.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Souvankham Thammavongsa is the winner of this year's Trillium Book Award for her collection of short stories, How to Pronounce Knife, published by McClelland and Stewart. Please welcome Souvankham Thammavongsa.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Jody. Hi, everyone.
Thank you both for joining us today. We're going to post links to where you can buy both of these books in the chat window. And before we get started, we hope that you will also be part of the conversation. Please submit your questions to us by using the hashtag ONCreates. Our social media team will forward the questions to me and we'll answer what we can. If you'd like to find out more about these authors, there are short video interviews on Ontario Creates YouTube channel. We're here to discuss Sick and How to Pronounce Knife. And I have to say that reading these, both of these books was a wonderful experience for me. Souvankham, I have read your book now multiple times, and each time I do so, it astounds me again, and I find new things in it. Jody, I was very happy to be introduced to your work as well through this collection. And Jody, I guess I wanted to start with you because my first question to both of you is very broad, given that these are not categories of literature or genres that get a lot of popular press. So Jody, why poetry? What is it about poetry that draws you as a writer? What is it that you feel that poetry can do that, say, prose or nonfiction essays, et cetera, can't?
Yeah, I kind of came to poetry sort of by accident when I started writing. And it sort of was the genre that felt closest to how my brain works kind of at the time. Processing through like a lot of traumatic experience and things that had happened to me in my life up until that point. And a lot of those experiences are fragmented, nonlinear. And the thing that I appreciate about poetry is not feeling bound to kind of Eurocentric kind of colonial like notions of like time or linearity or like narrative, and feeling like I could be honest without needing to prove like a kind of like truthfulness or like factuality kind of in my work, and just kind of letting my brain kind of come to these memories and tell them in their own way, which was sort of fragmented and image driven and contained. So it was kind of a way that that form mirrored what was happening or what needed to happen.
Do you feel that it's easier to, because there's a lot of very sensitive material in your book, material about mental illness, material about sexual assault, material about the death of your mother, and so on and so forth. Do you feel that it's easier to address that material honestly through verse rather than, say, a personal essay?
Yeah, I don't know about easier. I think it feels maybe less vulnerable somehow, right. And that in poetry, behind like the narrator, that there's still some distance for me, whereas in like personal essay, kind of lyric essay, when I've kind of written in those genres, it really feels like here right. I am. You were no other way to interpret that
you were named for, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So you were named for Jody Foster, is that correct?
Yeah, she was my mom's favorite actress.
Okay, so you were talking about the I in this book, and I made the critical mistake, one of criticism's cardinal sins at the beginning, in assuming a one-to-one correlation between you and the narrator of these poems. So I should ask right off the bat, how autobiographical is this book?
Kind of hard to answer, like, of course, and especially because a lot of these poems are ones that I wrote really early on as a writer, like some of the first poems that I ever wrote. So I don't know that I was thinking about it that critically at that time even, or like trying to hide necessarily, but I think it kind of gives space now, looking back on it, almost like 4 or 5 years probably since the last poem that is in this book was written.
Right.
To be like that I can still exist, and maybe that is who I was at that time, or that's who I thought I was at that time, and the I that I am now is different, and to still feel like connected to the narrator in these poems without it necessarily needing to be that I haven't changed, or that there isn't kind of growth or separation or distance that's happened. So I think that's something else that like the I of poetry like makes possible for me.
Fair enough. Souvankham, I want to bring you into the discussion as well, because you have historically written poetry, and you actually won the Trillium Book Award for Poetry in 2014 for your collection, Light. This is a shift for you, but I have always argued that the short fiction genre is more closely associated with poetry than it is with, say, the novel. Do you feel that? And what was it that made you decide that you wanted to shift genres for this book?
Really, the answer is simple. I wanted to. When you're a writer, you make deliberate, purposeful choices. I knew that I had before me many forms, in the same way an artist might work only with the color blue, cement, or plastic. I thought of that my material was words and the sentence, and I just shape it into the house that I walk into. And even though, you know, short fiction is different from poetry, I mean, it's close, but I still have to learn how to do everything all over again. And that's difficult. You have to think differently and move differently and shape differently. But to get back to why short fiction, really, because I wanted to.
Do you use sort of the same approach to your craft when you're writing short fiction as you do when you're writing poetry? Because I notice that the stories in How to Pronounce Knife, one of the things that jumps out at me is the language is similar to the language you use in your poetry, in the sense that it's very spare. In places, it's elliptical. You leave all ornaments off the page. So do you think the same way when you're writing as a short fiction writer that you do when you're writing as a poet?
Definitely. I'm observing the same things. I'm trying to get a reader to feel what what I'm putting onto the page. There's nothing there, and it's my job to get someone to feel what I've made. When we have feelings, we're alone with them. And what a wonderful way, whether it's poetry or short fiction, to get a reader to feel.
Jody, what about you? How do you negotiate the blank page and what to put on it and what to leave out when you're writing?
Yeah, I love Souvankham, what you just said about when we have feelings, we're alone with them, and like how this can be a tool to just be with those feelings, and kind of maybe for someone else to be with it in a different way with the thing that was made. I think in the process of writing this book, sometimes I made choices that I don't know that I would make again necessarily, in terms of especially around sharing like traumatic experience. I think a lot of this book was like aspirational in a way, but I got a bit ahead of myself and like where I actually was in my healing journey, or in the skills I had to then take care of myself after writing a poem that maybe was hard, or would go places that I was like not ready to kind of bring out into the open. Like I didn't really know how to protect myself, I think fully, with some of the poems that are in there. But I think another question that I have that kind of guides the writing that I do is like, how does this contend with power, and how does this writing kind of fit itself into like a larger kind of projects in my life of first being an organizer and a movement worker, and then seeing myself as an artist kind of after that as like a tool to participate in movements and kind of collective struggle. And so there is always that question of English itself being a tool of power that can be used to like obscure violence or excuse it or manipulate. And so how can I use that tool itself and the page to kind of work back against those things?
It's interesting that you talk about language as a tool to obscure or speak back to power, because a number of these poems include Chinese characters in them. And for white readers like me, or any reader who doesn't read simplified or complex Chinese characters, those characters have the effect of sort of destabilizing the reading experience and sort of giving a reader who doesn't speak or read the language a kind of understanding of what it would be like to approach English as a second language, or to not comprehend some of the things that are on the page. What was your motivation in terms of using those characters in the book without providing translation for the author or for the reader?
Yeah, it's definitely a really conscious choice to not do that, and sort of even shifting the center to ask like, why is English the default, and why would we even have to understand it as like comparing it to an experience of English being someone's second language or third language or whatever, and sort of a gesture of like defining kind of more clearly like the we of the poem, like who is actually kind of like meant to be in the room of this poem like with me, and who is kind of like allowed to peek in through the door, or like maybe there's a window, and that's okay. Like, of course, like this is a public art form, and it is kind of inviting people to witness it, but kind of saying not everything is for everyone, and that's okay. And I don't need to explain or define what this word means for that kind of like default reader.
Souvankham, you do much the same thing with language, although you don't include Lao words in your stories. You talk about the experience of approaching English as a foreign language, and I'm thinking now of stories like How to Pronounce Knife, the title story. I'm thinking of stories like Paris, and others where you're so embarrassing. For example, the one character, the daughter, changes her Lao name to Celine because she feels that is easy. It's easier for her as a high school student to fit in if she has a westernized name. And I know that you in your own work have resisted that impulse. How important is it for you to sort of work in that liminal space between the English language and the Lao language and or culture?
I take readers into the work and I don't explain the language. I'm in some ways, I treat it like a conspiracy in that, you know, the reader and I are both aware of the fun, the poking and the fun that we're having with the English language. Like with the English, with these stories, what I'm doing is pointing out the strangeness, the foreignness of the English language. And I'm doing it in the English language. Recently, How to Pronounce Knife was translated into French. And I thought it was so lovely to hear what I made in another language, because what you could hear in the French was the resentment, but also the curiosity and the wonder and the humor that comes out. And it's very clear when it's in a different language because there's that distance. But to do it in the English language and to get readers to conspire with you and to laugh at the English language, I think is challenging and incredibly fun. There's a story in the collection called The School Bus Driver, and there is a Lao word there, and it's a word that if you said on national TV, you would be bleeped out. But because nobody knows what the meaning of it is, I could get away with it from, you know, saying he, Tio, like no one would bleep that out because no one knows. Well, a lot of people, unless you speak Lao, know what that means. And I love showing a book to a Lao person and turning to that page and getting the laughter out of them. It's so, I mean, that for me is very enjoyable to watch readers participate and conspire with you and agree that the language is funny and weird and strange. But the point is to do it in the English language and to teach that this is weird, isn't it?
I love the fact that you emphasize laughter, because one thing that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about is how funny this collection is. And you have said in the past that you didn't feel comfortable or you didn't feel able to be funny in your poetry. Why is that? And what is the function of humor in the short stories for you?
Well, in the poetry, it's really my fault because I take myself so seriously when I'm writing poetry that I didn't leave room for myself to be funny. And when I was writing short stories, it just came really naturally. But also, it isn't just, it's an exploration of laughter. Like, why do we laugh? How do we form a joke? Who's in it and who's out of it? What kinds of laughter? What are the variations and the meanings of laughter? It isn't always haha, like funny. It's also the sound you make when things feel unbearable, or when you don't understand and there's nothing that you can say except to laugh in that moment because it's so absurd and you don't understand.
Jody, your collection covers, as we've suggested, some very difficult material. There's not a lot of laughter to be found in Sick, but I'm wondering if you feel the same way as Souvankham about the uses of laughter and the power of laughter to speak against trauma or to sort of speak to trauma in a way that not necessarily undercuts it, but that can make it more bearable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very relatable. I feel like took myself really seriously and found, yeah, being funny hard. And but again, like I think that is a lot more about my relationship with laughter, kind of in life, and off the page, and like what is my main coping mechanism to deal with trauma or hard things. Like I just make kind of ridiculous jokes about it all the time. But I think when it came to writing these poems, like then that felt wrong, because that was something that was distancing or kind of taking away from the honesty. But that was about like how my relationship with laughter kind of was playing out on the page.
Right.
And I think there's for me also a difference between laughter and the many ways that it kind of can be formed or used, and joy, which I do think I think both of them are really important. And more so, I think after this collection, I really turned into joy and like queer joy and like queer disabled like kinship, not as a balm or not as a distraction necessarily, but just as like a necessary and kind of a side of that that like depth, honoring that like depth and wholeness of the experience, which includes all of those things. And yeah, Souvankham, I'm curious about this in your work too, actually, but about the relationship with like play and fun. Like you were talking about like poking fun at English and how that's just like enjoyable. And yeah, I think I've been trying to also kind of lean into like play and experimentation and fun in my work too, although sometimes I can struggle with that and like trusting that even through play that I'm kind of like speaking with integrity. Or something.
There's one poem in this book in which you clap back to incels. And you know, there's some bitter humor in there, but there's also a lot of anger. Were you conscious of putting that anger on the page, particularly given the fact that there is a stereotype in Western culture that sort of resists, especially women being angry on the page, and especially women of color being angry on the page?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I don't know if I was like conscious of like wanting that poem specifically to be a vessel for anger, but I think in the book overall, wanting to not erase anger or make it small or more palatable, or any part of kind of an experience of madness to make it smaller or more understandable. Yeah, and I think there's kind of a lot of ways that women of color are are seen as like not angry, or that our anger is a form of resistance, and that owes a lot also to like a Black feminist lineage and kind of stereotype of angry Black woman, and how that kind of connects with stereotypes of like Asian women as kind of meek and submissive, and the ways that those two kind of play into each other. So I'm like conscious of those kind of lineages in this work too.
In terms of resisting stereotypes, Souvankham, there are two stories that I keep coming back to in your collection because they're so delightful. One is Mani Petty, which is about a very macho boxer who takes a job as a manicurist in his sister's nail salon. And the other is Slingshot, which is about a woman in her 70s who starts up a sexual relationship with a much younger man. When you were writing those stories, were you very conscious of resisting stereotypes? Where did those stories come from?
I thought it was kind of funny that women of color were often described as submissive and quiet. And I thought to myself, you know, who are you talking to that you see is, so, you know, like I didn't go in, I was just trying to tell the truth about the people I know and the people I'm surrounded by. We are not submissive or quiet. If you're a kid and someone calls you sexy, you're going to say, I'll cut it off. We'll see what's sexy then. Those are my characters. And that is something I said when I was a kid, to somebody in the building. I wasn't submissive or quiet, although people do see that about me and they're kind of surprised when they don't get that, but I'm not, because I know who I am.
Jody, your biography indicates that you have a number of irons in the fire. You're an organizer, you're a drummer, you're also a therapist, is that correct?
Yeah.
Where do you, if you were to create a Venn diagram of poetry or any kind of creative writing and therapy, would you find a large overlap between those two?
Yes. I think the core of both of those things for me is that they're both relational, and for me about kind of connecting with someone else, and also about, I feel like this word honesty is coming up a lot today. I'm not totally sure how I feel about it. That is sort of maybe where those Venn diagrams overlap for me in my own personal experience, at least. And about, also when I've gotten feedback on my writing, it is just sort of feedback about who I am as a person. We'll say oh, it really seems like you're erasing yourself in this poem, or it really seems like you're trying to shy away from this particular form of vulnerability, or you're shying away from being angry and saying it like it is. Or it seems like you're really protecting this person in your family who harmed you, and kind of those things are all the page and therapy are different spaces where those things can be kind of worked out.
One reference that I did want to ask you about, we're running out of time, we have to get to the audience questions, but one reference I did want to ask you about is there is a sequence of poems in here that reference Theresa Teng, who I didn't realize until I looked her up. She was a Google Doodle on the day that she either was born or died, and I can't remember which it was. Can you talk about Theresa Teng and her importance to you and your work?
Yeah, she is one of the people that I grew up listening to. My family had 2 cassette tapes that we would just listen to over and over again, and there's 3 people on them, and she was my dad's favorite artist, and so we knew all her songs and would sing along to them. And she kind of became in her life a symbol for a lot of things, for a lot of diasporic longing, and for people in a lot of different places. And for me, kind of became a symbol in this work of also obsession and desire and longing, both for a kind of home or connection to Hong Kong and to my family, and also of queerness.
And Souvankham, I don't know whether you have any cultural inspirations that went into how to pronounce knife. I know that the last time we talked about the book, you said that one of the inspirations for the book was your grandmother. Can you talk a little bit about how she?
My great-grandmother.
Great-grandmother, I apologize.
I never come across anyone like her in literature. Anytime we see a woman who's old in literature, she's always a burden, dying, or hates getting old. Whereas my great-grandmother never had that attitude, or never expressed those kinds of ideas about old age. She made it seem so fun, and such a point to move toward. She talked about it with such freedom and joy, and I wanted to put a character like that in a story. Someone like that at that age should be, should carry a love story. And I was so delighted to see readers' responses, it told me a lot about who they were and what their attitudes were about old age, the places where they balk at the idea of, you know, an old woman finding joy and feeling sexy.
We would like to turn to an audience question that we have received now, and I can remind the audience that we will be taking questions if you would like to put them into the chat at the bottom of the screen. But we have a question from the audience, and this is for both of you. So maybe Souvankham, we can start with you and then move on to Jody. The question is, are you currently working on a writing project? And if so, what themes do you want to explore next?
I am just about finish a novel, and I'm interested in failure. You know, I think you get more when you fail. You get the proximity to what it looks like when you win, but you also get what you have. And you know a thing more deeply when you fail, because when you win something, all you have is the win. Whereas when you fail, you have what you lost and the proximity to that win. The other thing I'm working on is, well, I just meet with the producers who are turning How to Pronounce Nice into a television show. I just meet with them to talk about how the stories unfold emotionally and what they mean. And it's a joy to watch someone in another field take what you make and view it through their material and their frames.
Jody, same question. Are you working on anything? And if so, what does it constitute?
Yeah, I'm always writing something. I think some of the poems that I've been working on recently, like, carry on a lot of the themes that are in this book around disability and queerness and kinship. But I think more recently, maybe the lens has widened a little bit. I'm feeling more confident also exploring kind of not just my own experience kind of situated within these systems, but also kind of working within interpersonal like relationships and community and what that looks like. And also have been doing just a lot more like collaborations with other artists of other mediums, also some performance art, drumming, a little bit of film. And I think kind of, especially in the last year, I think that has been giving me energy in creation is when the process of writing itself is an act of like relationship building with someone else.
In your writing practice, do you intend to stick with poetry, or do you have plans to branch out?
We'll see. You know, I try to write other things, and then I like.
Fair enough. There are no other questions in the chat, and I've been given the notice that we should start to wrap up. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? And begin just as one quick last question that I could give to you, Jody, because this is Ontario Creates Marquee Award. What does winning the Trillium mean for you?
I'm really grateful for kind of the community and both the people that I know of and that I'm meeting, even just here, the two of you, through this, and also anybody who will read or be kind of introduced to my work through this. Like, I don't take like any single person for granted who comes across and like forms a connection and a relationship. And I think, that's just like a beautiful way of kind of understanding a broader like definition of community and relationship. So I'm really grateful for that.
Souvankham, when you won the Trillium for Light, you said that I asked you, what did that mean for you? And you said people took more care in pronouncing your name correctly. What does winning the Trillium a second time mean for you?
Well, you know, this prize, we're up against, you know, like memoirs and essays as well. And that's a really wide pool. For me, the prize is about the history, joining the history of the writers who won this prize, to be counted among them, like Dion Brand, Alice Munro, Margaret Atwood. To be a part of that history is an honor. But of course, you know, prizes don't make books, writers do. And I'm thinking about the next book, and a prize is so unusual to win. It's easier to write a good book than it is to win a prize. And I'm so happy that I could come back again. And, you know, Stephen, I bet you did not have an easy time choosing the winner. You know, Emma Donoghue, Craig Davidson, Al Moritz, Farzana Doctor, to be among them, and to be chosen there. I can't imagine it was easy for the jury.
I don't think it is all that easy to write a good book. And I want to thank you both for the books that you have provided to readers in Ontario. I think readers should go out and pick them up, and pick up all of the books on both shortlists, because they are, I think, both very strong lists. And it certainly wasn't an easy job to narrow down the list to 5 and then to choose a winner. So thank you both for that. And I've been given the notice that we have run out of time for this conversation. So I will have to say that this concludes our conversation with the Trillium winners. Thank you so much, Jody Chan. Thank you so much, Souvankham Thammavongsa, for your work, for this conversation. Thank you for everything you do for Ontario authors and being part of that community. Thanks also to the audience who joined us today. And please be sure to pick up these books and those written by all the finalists from your independent bookseller. We will post a link in the chat to a Google map where you can find the independent booksellers closest to you, where you can pick up How to Pronounce Knife, Sick, and all of the other books that were shortlisted for these 2 prizes. We're going to leave you today with a retrospective video made for the 30th anniversary of the Trillium Award in 2017. We look forward to seeing Jody and Souvankham in the next iteration, and hope that this will leave you inspired with the wealth of Ontario literary talent. Thank you again. Read often, read widely. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
He says I can say a lot of things.
Quel immense privilège de faire partie de cette belle brochette d'auteurs ce soir. On célèbre 30 ans du prix Trillium.
Looking at this poster here tonight, I feel again kind of in awe of the experience and the company that I'm among.
But the special thing about the Trillium, of course, is that it celebrates literature from here, from this place where we live.
It's nice to get a local award because it's like your homeland saying you belong here.
On ne vit pas dans un pays où la peur règne, on vit pas dans un pays de guerre. On est libre de choisir les thèmes sur lesquels on veut travailler, et moi je me sens très privilégié de pouvoir vivre et écrire dans mon Ontario français.
Ce qu'il faut, c'est vouloir écrire. La reconnaissance viendra après.
I think you have to convince yourself you're an artist, and then you have to convince everyone else.
It's always the same advice, and the same advice is keep writing.
Set yourself a quota, sit down, do it.
Work at it the way you work at a job.
travailler, 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 lisez, lisez, étudiez, étudiez.
Or just take a nap. Taking a nap sometimes is the very best thing for a writer.
I started writing it on a boat in the Arctic, and it's about how you might murder somebody on a boat in the Arctic. How to murder somebody and get away with it.
Souvent, il y a des gens qui me disent « Marguerite, tu écris encore ?» And I say to myself, merde alors, qu'est-ce que c'est que cette affaire-là?
Just rolled over on top of their lovers and fully clothed, humped away. And the CBC radio broadcast this story last year, and it was interesting to see how they edited that passage.
Most of the poems I wrote about parenthood are poems about terror.
I hear very sophisticated people say, should we have so many awards? Well, let me tell you, if we who write and spend the many hours trying to create something out of nothing, if you take one award away, I will kill.
Avant de remporter le prix Trillium, c'est sûr, il n'y avait pas de prix vraiment beaucoup en Ontario et en fait, il y en avait, je pense qu'il y en avait un seul ici dans la région.
Le prix a évolué pour inclure les auteurs francophones il y a 22 ans. Et puis à un moment donné, le prix a évolué aussi pour inclure les auteurs de livres jeunesse. Et que c'est vraiment pas juste un prix littéraire, c'est un prix pour les auteurs.
Au MDC, I don't think you have the vaguest idea of what you're still doing for young poets.
I was very glad to win the Trillium.
It's a great pleasure to be associated with the Trillium.
I always thought it was an absolute full-blown, honest-to-God miracle, pennies from heaven, when in fact it happened to me. That's the way I felt about it.
Je voudrais signaler que un des multiples avantages du prix Trillium a été qu'il m'a fait découvrir plein d'amis et qu'il m'amène avec beaucoup de gens que j'admire et qui me stimulent.
I never thought in my life that I would be recognized as a writer. And to be given an award for that was very encouraging because it touched my heart. I mean, it touched me in a very profound way because they understood what I was talking about.
The Trillium Award, in my view at least, is one of the most important one, if not the most important one in Canada.
Le prix Trillium, c'est un parfum différent dans chaque livre. C'est la vie dans des enfants de papier.
There are so many good writers in this country. When I began, there were fewer of us. And, well, there was some doubt as there could be such a thing. And we got together and we proved that that was wrong. There could indeed be Canadian writers, and this room fills that to such perfection. I'm so proud of you all.
Bon anniversaire, Trillium, 30 ans, c'est quelque chose.
And thank you for creating a conversation around literary culture.
Et je vous souhaite donc une longévité, que ça continue, parce que nous en avons tous besoin, et merci du fond du cœur.
Le prix Trillium, c'est l'incarnation de la diversité dans notre société.
The important thing is that you could say for the rest of your life that you have won the Trillium.